Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Crypto News Podcast. We are buzzing as always, and today's guest is coming in hot from the one and only London, England. We love to see it. Today we have Denis Dalkilic on the pod, the CTO of MRHB, pronounced Marhaba, which means welcome in Arabic. That is MRHB DeFi. He's also the co-founder of Paribus. Denis has a Master of Science in Computer Software Engineering from the City University of London and has had a strong career in software dev for the last 10 years. He was actually scouted by Tottenham Hotspur at the age of 13, which we will definitely get into because that is cool as hell. Denis has worked in Web2 for a hot minute, working at incredible companies like Vodafone and Thomson Reuters. In 2018, he jumped into blockchain and has co-founded two companies, one being Bounty OX or Bounty 0x, where he was the CTO until 2022, and Paribus in 2021. In the later half of 2021, Denis joined MHRB DeFi as the Chief Technology Officer, where he is now in charge of the company's product and architecture development. Super pumped to have you on. Denis, welcome to the show, my friend.
Thanks for having me. That was a pretty comprehensive introduction.
There was a hell of a lot more, I'm not gonna lie, but I tried to just sort of condense it in and go from there. Denis, I wouldn't say big, but I'm, as a Canadian, there's not a whole lot of Canadians without sort of European heritage that truly have a crazy love and affinity for European football, which, we call soccer across the pond. Last couple of years, I've sort of been getting into it. I don't have a team yet. I, don't really want to be a bandwagoner. I used to love watching Liverpool back when, a couple of years ago when Salah was tearing it up. I just felt their style of football was very beautiful. Obviously, Barca, Real Madrid, PSG with those three guys up front is a treat, but still don't have a team. We'll get into that later. But I'd love to start with you being scouted by Tottenham at the age of 13. What the heck is that like? I want to hear every little detail of this story. I've heard some crazy stories about the academy for all these world-class, Premier League teams. How did that all happen? How did it all go down?
Yeah, so I've been playing football since I was probably 6. So it's been sort of a journey, just sort of continuous throughout my life. I mean, I still play football, but obviously not at professional level. So yeah, since 6 I was playing, and then I was part of this small community club within North London, which is where I basically grew up, and I still reside in Northeast London. And from that small community club, they usually have like scouts coming down from different clubs within the UK, especially within the London area, watch the games, and then they would like point out a few kids who they're interested in. So that's basically how it came to be. It was one of these playoff games. I think it was a tournament game that we were playing when I was 13 in an 11-a-side tournament that we had for a made-up cup. Obviously, it didn't mean anything, but when you're that deep into the hole, it means everything to try to win that trophy. So I played attack and mid, and that's basically during that game, I had a good game, to be honest. And it got picked up. So there were inquiries, and then I went into a few training sessions with the whole club, so scouting system. But it was going really well, and it looked like it was going to become a full-fledged thing. And then I turned out I had an asthma problem. So it kind of shut down the dream of becoming a football player because I was just not physically able to have the stamina that was required. Especially, I mean, if you watch Premier League, you know how high intense it could become. It's sort of up and down, up and down. So because of that physical condition, they had to drop me, which was, of course, devastating at the time. As a 13-year-old, it's like your whole world comes crashing down. You work so hard.
Yeah.
But when you have family around, they always somehow support you. They find a way to sort of see things differently. It was quite difficult, a few years. But eventually, I then moved on from sports to a completely different, irrelevant place, which is where computers and sort of programming came into thing. And I started coding about 15 years old. And since then, I've been sort of chasing this technology pursuit. So that's basically my background and brief story.
Sorry to hear about the asthma, but that is a pretty darn cool story and quite an intriguing one as well. You rarely hear of the sort of switch from athletics to like very sought after discipline like computer science. Like normally it's like coming from someone like myself, it's like athletics to sales or marketing, right? Where you can sort of take some of those team building skills and tenacity that you learned on the pitch or whatever sport you used to play and bring that into, you know, some type of environment where you still got to be the go-getter. And I'm not saying that computer science doesn't have that mentality, but it's usually, you know, it's a 1v, it's a singular game. You're playing against yourself, right? Whereas in sales, you're sort of going against another person. I always find that interesting. But going back to Tottenham for a second, when you're at the academy, did you play with any, you know, players who just popped off and are world-class players at the moment?
Yeah, I did. I mean, there's a few guys that basically made it to the top league, which is the Premier League, of course. So if you could basically name about 5 or 6 different guys from that era. I forgot their names now, but it's been such a long time. But yeah, there's a few names. I have to look up the names. I do actually follow their football quite a bit, but most of them are coming to a stage where they're sort of fading away in their career because of the age, of course.
Right, yeah.
But yeah, there was a few guys that made it within that little scouting system that we were picked out from.
Why get into computer science? Like why coding of all things after you knew your football career was done?
To be honest, I always ask myself the same question. I don't know. It was quite a drastic change because I was always interested in sort of gaming and technology and gadgets, etc. But it was never a sort of intriguing matter for me where I would ask myself, how does it work behind the scenes? But then I guess maybe the whole sort of concept around, you know, the whole process around me not being scouted and not being able to follow that dream kind of put me back into this shell, right? So I was upset for a couple of years. I didn't really want to do much because everything had failed for me. So I sort of turned towards computers and sort of started reading a bit more, started getting intrigued as I read more and more. So I guess it was like a blessing in disguise that I didn't get picked because I was able to sort of look elsewhere, which is completely irrelevant. And once you get into computing, I think it's mentally and intellectually challenging. So it keeps you going. And you know, you want to do something, even if there is a solution for something that's out there, you could possibly rewrite the entire solution in a different manner that would be like, okay, look, this is more efficient. So that kind of approach and that kind of thought process pushed me more and more down the rabbit hole, and eventually became a thing for me where I would actually enjoy sitting for hours and reading about different programming languages, how things work behind the scene, TCP/IP, base level stuff. And then, of course, once you know that, then you actually start wanting to build something on top of all this technology. And that's sort of how it became an avalanche and became what it is today.
Great story there. You tore it up at some pretty darn reputable Web2 companies as well. I mean, Thomson Reuters, huge, Vodafone, massive, Royal Mail, Polestar Alliance, Lloyd's, like just big stuff. And then you left for Web3. I always ask this to my guests because I find it so intriguing when it's not like you're at a company and, you know, you weren't climbing the ranks and you didn't have a cushy job, but you had all these things. I feel like, and again, I'm just throwing a dart here, but I feel like you had a lot of the things that you wanted and still jumped to Web3, which always intrigues the hell out of me. So I got to ask, why the jump to Web3 a couple of years ago? And walk me through that whole decision-making process. Was there a specific aha moment where you were like, screw it, it's got to happen? How did that all go down?
Yeah. So so when I first met blockchain, it was actually quite late. And the way it came about is they had an internal project where they were using Hyperledger, the permission blockchain, to basically create this alliance of node operators, which are basically banks at the time. And they wanted to track their mortgage incomes and losses within this private ledger. Then I got really intrigued by the whole concept. So I was like, how are these people sharing data without any sort of compromise, et cetera, et cetera? And then you went down the rabbit hole of like distributed ledgers and decentralized systems. And then, of course, the golden standard, which is, in my opinion, is always Bitcoin and its proof of work consensus mechanism. So once you started reading about those, it sparked something in my mind where I was like, this must be the future, because a centralized future is not is not appealing to the masses, but the decentralized future does appeal to the masses. The idea that you could control your identity and data, you could just plug into these systems and become part of it, build something on top of it, without having to go through the bureaucracy of corporates and centralized systems. It became very intriguing at a sort of philosophical level. But then when you go down to the technical level, it became even more intriguing, because every line of code, at least let's take this EVM side, because that's how I basically came across blockchain. Every line of code that you write in Solidity can have negative and positive consequences in terms of gas cost, execution speed, and how the whole thing works. Whereas when you look at the centralized systems, there is no such concept. I mean, you could write garbage code. Yes, it will not perform as you wish it would be. It's not performant, but it's not a matter of where people are paid more to execute your code. So this whole concept of writing good code to actually get people to use your code in an efficient manner appealed to me quite a bit. So I wanted to do more and more and make it as gas efficient as possible. And since then, of course, the Web3 world is massive. You have DeFi, NFTs, you have decentralized identities now, and with the ZK technology coming in, it's just it's just a growing, intriguing feeling where you want to see what's the next thing that's going to come on? What's the next thing that's going to come on? Because I believe to a certain point, centralized systems, of course, they're great. You know, they enable us to even interact like this right now. But in 10 years, 20 years time, do I see centralization as being the main backbone of the internet? Probably not. And that question is the question that I asked myself before. I was like, well, this is a risk I'm going to take. I have a good job, and I did have a family. I still have a family with a newborn, actually, when I joined the Web3 space. So it was a big risk. But I asked myself the question, and the answer was quite apparent to me. So I took the leap of faith. I took the risk, and thankfully things worked out. And now I'm able to write code that I enjoy writing code. And the code that I write, the way I see it, it's public good. It doesn't belong to me just because I wrote it. So it's there. Anyone can benefit from it. That's basically my backstory onto going into Web3.
That's, again, man, Dennis, you're on a roll here. It's crazy to think about, but it's one of the sort of commonalities why a lot of the people who had really good jobs at Web2 companies decided to join Web3, because they understood that the technology was going to be the future, and they didn't really want to be left behind, right? They sort of wanted to be a pioneer in the new industry, similar to people a little bit older than us had opportunities back in the early 2000s with, Web 2.0. I guess that was Web, 1.0 at the time, but the .com era, as most people call it. Let's jump into a couple of your companies. Let's start out with MRHB. I guess before we get into that, one of the points that you're very passionate about is decentralizing cloud computing for the Web3 industry and the multitudes of advantages that come with that compared to centralized options like the AWS, Microsoft Azure, Google Cloud. There's some crazy stat, I always forget the exact number, but it's something like 95% of all cloud computing on the internet runs on those three platforms, which is like pretty crazy to think about, where, if those three switches went out, the internet would be gone. And if the internet's gone, like, that's probably a shoe-in for World War III. Crazy to think. But walk me through your thesis on why decentralizing cloud computing is so paramount to succeed and to success in the Web3 industry.
The basic is what you've basically just said. There's too much power in the hands of very few companies. It's just this power is not solely running the applications on the internet, but actual data collection, data processing, and how that data is used. These corporates have become what they are because there is demand for these services. And if there is demand for these services, you ask the question, well, where can I go to get the service? And if you have limited number of options, then inevitably you're going to end up with them as well. So that monopoly has to be broken down. That's my top priority and top belief into why I became part of the Web3 world and why I developed the projects that I'm developing. We have to break that monopoly apart. And it's a must because, as you mentioned, I think we actually had a small glimpse of a blackout with Cloudflare, for example, where they control a large percentage of the DNS and the routing of the traffic, etc. Where the Cloudflare went down, I think 3-4 months ago, and a lot of websites were unreachable. this shows the danger that we have and how much centralization there is. And as a software engineer, we're always educated and taught that there should always be a backup of a backup. And if the backup of a backup is not there and the main system goes down, then we have chaos. Like chaos is obviously, it's not about just losing money. Today, the internet is involved in from healthcare to emergency services to whatever you could think of. Internet has a part to play in it. So if this backbone goes down, or if it's censored to be in line with certain group or certain individuals' views, then we basically go against what we have built, which is, we all love the democracy, we all love freedom of speech. But when you look at the reality, the infrastructure that we have built contradicts exactly what we like about where the places that we live in. With all that in mind, I think it's crucial that we decentralize the future and we decentralize the computation power, and we share some of the computation resources that we have to be able to reach the entire globe. Because right now, if you look at certain third world countries, they don't have what the Western nations have, right? And the only reason why they don't have it is because they have limited financials, they have limited access to the internet itself. So we need to find a way to share the wealth within the Western world with the rest of the world so that everyone could be on the same level. And once we're on the same level, I think that's when you get really creative minds working towards a common goal, which is for the common good of the human race.
Well said. And honestly, that's a great segue to another point that I wanted to ask you about, and that's the benefits of tokenizing commodities, right? People who don't live in the Western world or Europe or the wealthier parts of Asia, obviously you can throw Australia in there as well, but it's very difficult for them to have access to financial instruments that allow them to create, not even really wealth, just earn some type of passive income, right? And one of the best parts about crypto and DeFi is that we have the opportunity to tokenize a shitload of commodities, gold, silver, and this is a massively killer use case for DeFi. And I know you and the team at MRHB are grinding on this, and heck, this should come out pretty darn soon. I'd love if you could take a deep dive into this point and talk about the importance of this.
We actually released this product. So it's actually live right now. It's within the Sahara wallet. So Sahara wallet is the non-custodial wallet of the MRHB network. And within it, we have integrated what we call Tijarex, which is basically tokenized commodities exchange. So we partnered with an Australian gold bullion. They're called AIMSI. They've been around for 80, 90 years now. They hold the physical gold and physical silver within their vault, which is reserved, and then they tokenize it based on today's gold price. So 1 gram of gold, I think it's worth like $60 at the moment, US dollars. So that would be the equivalent in token. And we've put this on chain, and now it's basically permissionless trading. And we have even gone one step further, and we've got Ainsley to implement proof of reserve, which is from Chainlink's features, to make sure that the gold is genuinely there and it's being kept in a vault. It's not being reused by another venture. In fact, the gold, the tokens that you buy on Tijarex are actually redeemable to physical gold. They would deliver it to your house wherever you are, of course, subject to taxes, etc., which is not ideal. If you want quick access to
that's crazy.
Yeah, it's pretty insane. It's pretty insane. So if you want access to the cash, you could of course sell it for USDT instantly within that. But if you want actual physical gold, you could demand this and it will be redeemed within 40 days. I think this is crucial. And I think this is the first step of real world assets coming on chain. And this is a trend that we're seeing. So I believe tokenization is important because we want to be able to tokenize minerals and commodities and metals, precious metals, that may be present in, let's say, Congo, but they're not able to export it and they're not able to, let's say, sell it to the world. But if they can come onto a solution like Tijarex and quickly tokenize their precious metals or minerals and start acquiring liquidity for it, then, of course, this opens the door up for more development within that nation. It opens the doors up for people to actually get involved with Web3, to say, look, it's not all about cryptocurrencies and volatile markets. If you want, there are safe havens within the crypto world as well, which attracts more users to the Web3, which is I mean, eventually that's our end game as crypto people, to onboard more people into the Web3 space. So I think it's a good milestone on that end goal. And I think it's crucial for developing nations, especially, to be able to leverage this technology to maximize their development within their nations.
Dennis, we're going to take a quick break and give a massive shout out to our sponsor of the show. And when we get back, we are going to jump into Halal DeFi, which is something that I am so friggin' interested about. Never heard of until you and the team made this happen. And we're going to get into this in uno minutes. To begin, got to give a huge shout out to our sponsor of the show, and that is Prime XBT. The team at Crypto News loves Prime XBT, as they offer a robust trading system for both beginners and professional traders. It doesn't matter if you're a rookie or a vet, you can easily design and customize your layouts and widgets to best fit your trading style. Prime XBT is also running an exclusive promo for listeners of the Crypto News podcast. After making your first deposit, 50% of that first deposit will be credited to your account as a bonus that can be used as additional collateral to open positions. The promo code is CryptoNews50, and that's CryptoNews50 to take advantage of this offer and receive 50% of your deposit credited to your trading account. And now back to the show with Dennis. Dennis, when I was doing research for this, the topic that got me going the most was Halal DeFi. I was absolutely blown when I came across this. I'm not even going to try to jump into this because you are literally the guru and master of this. There is actually a crazy need for this as well, and we got to get into it. Walk me through Halal DeFi. What exactly is it? Why it is important? Tell me about the challenges of building a Halal DeFi platform, but the floor is yours. Let's get right into Halal DeFi.
So Halal DeFi, I mean, it could be termed as ethical DeFi as well, because it aims to be sustainable. It's built on the foundations of Islamic finance. Islamic finance is obviously fenced and dictated by certain rules within Sharia, which is the Islamic law rules. When you say Sharia, there is a prejudice that Sharia is all about, X, Y, Z. But Sharia has positive concepts, especially across finance and how individuals should interact and exchange with one another. So the main thing to understand rather than going deep down the rabbit hole of Sharia, because there are experts that are sort of discussing this day in, day out. But the main concept is it needs to be clean of interest. So that means there is no interest involved within the system of this Halal DeFi. Or Islamic finance. So what we looked at is Islamic finance before we started the project, and we realized, this is my personal opinion, but I realized that Islamic finance or Islamic banks tend to replicate the high street banks or the usual banks that we're used to, and their loans model and interest model, but they sort of sugarcoat it and say it's not interest, it's something else. But when you look at how it works, it's interest. So it's very hard to go against that in the traditional Web2 financial space because it's set in stone. There is a foundation. Fintech exists today. Fintech existed 100 years ago, at least the concepts around it. And so the whole mechanism of how money flows in and out is set in stone, where it's just basically interest driven. What Web3 allows us to do is actually look at how money is generated, look at how the traditional world handles money, and actually give us a chance to rewrite some of it, because it's a brand new world. DeFi is a brand new world. The whole concept of DeFi's composability, the whole concept of it's open and permissionless, it's not controlled by a single entity, central entity. So therefore, you don't have to go through 20 loops to get to a result. If you have an idea that you believe is Sharia compliant, with, of course, subject to reviews from Sharia experts, then you could write the code, execute it, and see how it behaves in the real DeFi world. So this is a sort of a paradigm shift for us, because we're able to actually rethink the entire thing and actually genuinely create Islamic finance products that adhere to the Sharia rulings and not just sugarcoat things. For example, when you lend money in Islamic in Sharia, you're not permissioned to make usury, which is high interest rates, etc. If you are lending money, then you're basically taking on a risk of not being repaid. And you can make an upfront contract where you say, okay, I'll give you, let's say 100, but with certain fees, it will be 110 back in X amount of time. But you can't exploit that contract and start increasing your interest rates and etc., where it would put the opposite counterparty in a difficult position where they would continuously grow debt. And this debt just continuously grows out and spirals out of control, which is, in my opinion, what's happened with the traditional banking system, because it's so fractionalized, it's so interest driven. It's just growing debt and debt and debt. And then we're basically in this massive hole where the debt is unpayable. It's just not going to be payable. We basically set up certain systems to allow for this two-way interaction between individuals. We set up systems to allow individuals to invest within the DeFi as a whole, but stay away from those interest-bearing protocols. And we find ways to generate income for our end users between 5 to 15% per year, while making sure everything is Sharia compliant, in that there is no interest, there is no illegal activity like gambling or nudity, pornography, or blackmail, all that stuff. So it's all ethically, sustainably returns that you make, and we do not put anyone in debts that they could never come out of. That's essentially what ethical or halal DeFi is. It's just a layer on top of existing DeFi to filter out some interest-bearing protocols.
I mean, I love that. So just like you said, halal could almost be subbed out for ethical. Like it's really, those words are synchronous.
Yeah, exactly.
Gotcha. So when it comes to building a platform like that, there must be tons of challenges, because normally, like, interest and different spreads and safety barriers, those are all worked into the algo, right? To save the actual market maker like you guys. But when you're doing it this way, like you spoke about, I guess you and the team really are taking on like a shitload of risk, right? Because you have these ethical and perhaps fairer contracts than traditional finance, and more specifically, the current DeFi model. Am I on the right track there?
Yeah. I mean, we try to minimize our risks because we are just essentially a facilitator between two parties. So as long as we can give both the parties enough context and detail into what they're getting into, it's basically down to the individuals if they want to pursue that venture or not.
Interesting. Another thing you guys built is Amplify, which is like Amplify AI, which is the first halal liquidity harvester, and Miro, the first halal staking platform. And again, when doing research for this, I read a bunch that I didn't know before, and there are some, perhaps weird is the wrong word, but just uncommon for someone like me who lives in the Western world, a bunch of different passive wealth generation methods from a halal point of view, and also how staking would work from a halal point of view and the challenges in achieving this. And I'd love if you could talk about both these points, because again, for someone like me, this is such a foreign concept.
So Amplify AI is essentially a liquidity harvesting tool. We allow individuals to drop in, whether that's a stablecoin or ETH or etc., into these pools, and we take those from the vault and distribute it across the DeFi space. But we only distribute it across the DeFi space to protocols that are not interest-bearing. So we would, for example, not deposit the funds into Aave, even though Aave could potentially give us a better return. It's not Sharia compliant because of its interest fundamentals. So we would take this and distribute it across different chains. We're integrated with 6 chains at the moment, and about I think 10 different DEXs that we're going to be integrated with. And within those DEXs, we continuously check for which are the most lucrative pools, and then we deposit the funds. Once we deposit the funds, of course, we have to watch out for things like if more liquidity enters that pool, then the APY drops naturally. So we continuously keep track of our investments, which we make on behalf of which we distribute on behalf of the users. But to mention, this is all non-custodial, so you can pull out at any time you want. We basically give you hints as to where you should probably move, but the move is actually down to you. So we don't take control of your funds at any point. Yeah, we did. We moved the funds across the spaces. We make suggestions based on our working and data consumption, and we're able to generate 5 to 15% based on our back testing and our plans, while keeping Sharia compliant, which is quite unique because not a lot of protocols can promise such thing because it's quite complex. And I'll be honest, writing the code took us about 6 months. Discussing the whole thing took us about 9 months because we have to go through Sharia. So the way internally we work is we will come out with an idea as the engineering team, say Amplify AI, and we'll write up the document in detail, how it's going to work, where the money is going to go, where the money is going to come from, and what sort of fee structure, etc. And we'll present this to the Sharia governance board that we have, which has 3 members at the moment. These are actual scholars within Islamic schools, and they specialize in Islamic finance in general, cryptocurrencies, and of course Sharia itself. And they read this document, they review it between them, they will come up with a bunch of questions, and then these questions will be the point of discussion from there on, which with the last product that we built, it took us 9 months. And it took us 9 months because we have to explain and we have to make sure each member understands the exact flow of funds, because obviously to make that decision whether it's Sharia compliant or not is a big ask on the scholars itself. It's not an easy task to just say, it's Sharia compliant, especially if you're practicing Muslim, then you have a certain level of responsibility that you need to stick to. You can't just be like, oh, this is Sharia compliant and brush it over. You have to know each and every single detail. So this is why the discussions take time. We sometimes have to restructure and rechange everything, which we have a couple of times internally before we get into a final decision. And it's the same flow that we basically follow across all our products. Engineering team comes out with an idea, goes through a document gets reviewed by a Sharia team, discussions, and then eventually a final blueprint of the product. And then we start coding with the whole engineering team.
That's crazy. What a process, man, oh man. Dennis, you've been on fire today, man. I know we're getting a little tight for time. One last topic that I really want to get into is decentralized philanthropy, which is actually an upcoming MRHB DeFi product. I know one of the sort of recurring themes of the pod has been everything halal and Muslim related. And you can speak to this very well, the importance of philanthropy for Muslims. And sort of a segue would be if you could get into the advantages of a decentralized philanthropy platform as opposed to traditional methods of giving to charity. I'd love if you could go for a nice buzz on these topics.
So that side of the charity or the product is quite important to us. Although Marable might seem like a very Muslim-focused and Sharia-focused platform, in essence, as I mentioned earlier, it's just an ethical platform that sort of ticks the boxes that Muslims are looking for to enter crypto space. Our end goal is always to onboard users into Web3, whether this is through ethical finance, whether this is through another project, whether this is through something else, such as account abstraction, etc., etc. End goal is always the same. We need more users. We need more adoption. So when you think about the number of Muslims across the globe, I think there's like 1.6 billion now. And that's essentially a quarter of the population. If we can get 1% of that Islamic finance, so 1.6 billion people, and then that equates to $3 trillion globally within Islamic finance. If we can get 1% of that $3 trillion, this is a huge milestone for us. In terms of number of users, in terms of amount of TVL that could be locked up within Web3 protocols, not necessarily at Marable, but essentially, if we can give them a way to enter the space without any confusion and take away all the complexities, then we have already won, because that's our end goal. So one of those ways to get them into the platform and actually start using it day to day throughout their life, not just to invest, is to offer charity platforms such as the product that we're building. So there is a concept within the Islamic religion. It's called zakat. You pay this once a year. It's essentially like it is a charity giving. You have to give, I think it was 2% of your wealth once per year to the people in need, regardless of who they are, where they are. It doesn't matter, but you have to give this money. It's part of the main pillars of Islam. So if we can build a product where we directly integrate with charities and everything is transparent by default because of blockchain nature, and you see your money flowing from your wallet to the charity's wallet, and then from there, the charity could, of course, bring in more integration with blockchain to see how they actually spend those funds, then it streamlines the whole process. Because right now, a lot of people in crypto, for example, if you are in crypto right now and you want to pay zakat, you have to off-ramp it. You have to change this to fiat. And when you fiat it, it's subject to tax and capital gains tax, etc. And sometimes you just really don't want to touch fiat, but there is no other option, right? So if we can provide this charity work where we can integrate with charities all across the globe and start actually genuinely helping people, then that's another box that we have ticked into the day-to-day lives of these people who want to use Web3 for the betterment of everyone. So this is quite important to us. We are trying to reach out to many charities, and when I say charities, I'm not only referring to Islamic or Muslim charities. This is we're trying to reach anyone, anywhere who has the need for these funds. You will see in the upcoming 6 to 12 months, we will make announcements and partnerships with different charities across the globe to help different people, and you can donate directly from your wallet without ever having to go off ramp. And that's essentially why I think it's important, because if you could do everything that you do with fiat on chain, then why would you ever go back to fiat? So if we can achieve that completeness of the system, then we're making a good progress. We're making good progress for sure.
Dennis, what an episode, man! This was Alpha City. Dropped a bunch of incredible stuff. Really appreciate this. Before you go, can you please let our listeners know where they can find you and MRHB online and on socials? Plug yourself and MRHB.
Yeah, sure. So on socials, MRHB Network, MRHB DeFi on Twitter or LinkedIn. You can find us there. We have a Telegram group. So just go on our website, mrhb.network. All the links are there to the Twitter, to the Telegram, LinkedIn, etc. You can tag me directly in the Telegram chats. I do always respond to questions, etc. My tag at Telegram is DNZDLKLC. So you can find me on LinkedIn and Twitter as well. Twitter handle is the same as Telegram handle, and LinkedIn is just my full name. I will come up. But yeah, reach out to me if you have any questions regarding Marabou, regarding Paribus, regarding anything else within Web3 space, and I'll be happy to have a chat.
Dennis, what an episode, man. Really appreciate it. Wishing you and the team all the best. You guys are crushing it. I love to see that. And you have an open invite for round 2, my friend. Until next time, all the best. And we will keep in touch.
Yeah, keep in touch.
Folks, what an episode with Dennis, CTO of MRHB and co-founder of Paribus. He was dropping knowledge bombs left, right, and center. And what an incredible topic of halal DeFi, also known as ethical DeFi, something that I've never heard of until doing research for the show. I'm sure many of you are in the same yacht as me, and now we know all about it. Truly a great episode. Huge shout out to Dennis and the team. If you guys enjoyed this one, and I hope you did, please do subscribe. It would mean the world to my team and I. Speaking of the team, love you guys. Thank you for everything. Eustace, my amazing sound editor. Appreciate all your hard work. And to the listeners, love you guys. Keep on growing those bags and keep on staying healthy, wealthy, and happy. Bye for now, and we'll talk soon.